Hey guys, this is Clay Lehman with Resolute Property Management. Today we're continuing our series for do-it-yourself landlords, and we're going to be covering a lot of ground. The topic we're talking about today is tenant move-in. Okay, so we've fixed our house up, we've advertised it for rent, we've screened our tenants, and now we're ready to move them in. There's a lot to do from now until the time that we hand the keys over to the tenant. So let's just jump right in. One of my favorite sayings comes from the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, and that is, begin with the end in mind. So we're going to start this process with the end in mind. The end being 2 things: the end of the lease, which we want the tenant to renew, but the end of the tenancy, so when the tenant's going to vacate. Where I'm going with this is, one of the first things you're going to do is you want to do a sales clean and a lawn service. And I apologize, sales clean is something of a real estate term. It basically means get it show ready. You want the house to look exactly the way you want it when you get it back. So you want to give it to the tenant extremely clean, and you want the lawn to be extremely or perfectly manicured. You want it the way that you want it back, so that when the tenant moves in, you can say, hey, look around you, this is how I want my house back. Next, you want to document the property condition. Again, begin with the end in mind. One of the things that leads to the most disputes between landlords and tenants is security deposit disputes. At the end of the lease, the tenant's going to move out, and then you're going to go through the house and determine what to withhold from the security deposit. To do that successfully, you have to start right by documenting the condition of the home. So let's talk about that. First, you're going to begin by thoroughly inspecting the home. And what you're doing here is you're trying to identify anything that could go wrong with the home. We mentioned this in a previous video when we talked about preparing the home for market. Now, before you move the tenant in, you're going to go through it all again. You're going to turn on every faucet, every hot water, every appliance, every stove eye, everything in the house. Turn it on, work with it, inspect it, make sure it works. And if you find something that doesn't work, make the repairs. It's so much easier to repair a property before you move a tenant in. It's cheaper, it's easier, it's faster than once you've moved the tenant in. So make the repairs. Once you've done all of this and the home is in the condition you're giving it to the tenant, understand the power of video. We all, at this point, have in our pockets the greatest movie making device ever made. Well, maybe it's not the greatest, but it's the easiest video making device ever made. If you have a smartphone, then you have the window into making a video. Walk through the property and document the condition using a video. Make a video of the condition of the home. That is extremely powerful evidence should you ever go to court to support the security deposit position you took, whether you withheld because the condition had changed from move in to move out. That video is going to be your best support. The next thing we're going to talk about is something you should have done already. Okay, let's say you didn't. Make sure that you have liability insurance on your home. Now, many people that we speak to, homeowners that are converting into owning a rental property, will say, well, I do have insurance on my home. Well, that may not be the same. You typically hold what's called hazard insurance on a property. When you convert it over to a rental, you want to also have general liability insurance. That covers you should anything happen at the home that you are in turn sued for. That general liability insurance is what will protect you. The other thing that's really important, and why kind of making sure that you have general liability insurance, is it leads to a conversation with your insurance company. Sometimes, again, we find that homeowners don't understand the insurance company needs to know that that is no longer a home that you're going to occupy as the owner, but it's a home that you're going to rent. And the reason that they need to know is if they don't know, they may not cover you if there are issues with your tenant. The last thing you want is to call your insurance company and say, hey, there's been an issue with my tenant, and have the insurance company respond with, what tenant? You want to make sure that your insurance company knows that you've converted it into a rental, and you want to make sure that you have liability insurance in place. We recommend no less than $300,000, but the price difference between $300,000, $500,000, and $1 million is not that significant, and so it's worth talking to your insurance company. All right, now we've documented the condition of the home, we've fixed all the repairs that are needed, and it's time for us to start the actual move-in process with our tenant. So up first, we're going to collect our move-in funds. Now, your move-in funds would have been established based on your tenant's application process and background check. You will typically see that we're going to collect, that you're going to want to collect the first month's rent. You want to collect that before they move in so that you know you've at least collected the first month's rent. And then you want to collect a security deposit. So as I stated, you want to collect the first month's rent. You want to collect your security deposit, okay? You want to do that before you release keys to the tenant. You don't ever want to do that on the promise of, well, once I get moved in, I'll get you the check. No. You want to make sure that you have those funds. You want to have them as certified funds. So either like a bank check or if you are accepting a personal check, accept it far enough in advance that you know that it's cleared, at least a week in advance of the move-in. All right, so now you've collected the security deposit. What do you do with the security deposit? This is critically important for you to know. I will tell you, you can Google this question and find tons of resources to help you understand how to manage your security deposit. But you have to keep in mind that that security deposit is not your money. It's actually the tenant's money that you're holding on their behalf until they move out. Florida law dictates what a landlord is required to do with a security deposit. Within 30 days of collecting the security deposit, you are required to notify the tenant in writing if the security deposit is being held in an interest-bearing account, what bank or depository you are holding your security deposit in, and if it is an interest-bearing account, you have to let them know the rate of the interest as well as the timing of interest payments. I will tell you that for all of our escrow funds that we hold, escrow and security deposits, we hold them in non-interest-bearing accounts simply because the amount of interest is so low, it's not really worth the tracking and communication of the payments. So my recommendation is to just find a non-interest-bearing account. I would hold your security deposit separate. Now, meaning separate from your funds. If you have multiple units, I think it's okay to keep the security deposits in one account, but I would reconcile that account every month. We do that we're actually required by the state of Florida, but we do that anyway as a brokerage. We reconcile our escrow and security deposit accounts, and you want to make sure that you're accounting for those funds. As I stated before, one of the number one areas of friction and litigation between tenants and landlords is the security deposit disputes. Okay, now this is a big part of our business, but it should be a big part of your tenant move-in process, and that is set expectations. You want to let the tenant know what behavior you expect from them. Now, that should be included in the lease. So review the lease with the tenant and spend time on those things that are important to you and set the expectation for the tenant. One of the most important things is, how are they going to pay rent to you? I am a huge believer in making it as easy as possible for people to transact business with you, meaning I want them to pay their rent, so I want to make it as easy as possible. So we've set up various conduits through which a tenant can pay rent. One thing I'd recommend against, or I guess I would not recommend would be a better way to say it, is picking up the rent from your tenant. I know that's a common practice among do-it-yourself landlords. That's great when things are going good, but when things aren't going well between you and your tenant, the last thing you want is a confrontation over rent payments. So I would recommend finding a way for them to, and maybe use Venmo or one of the other electronic payment systems, or set up with your bank a way for them to make deposits to you. I wouldn't give out your banking information. I feel like that's a little bit risky, but there's different ways that you can set up to make it really easy for your tenant to pay you. The next thing that is a big area of friction between landlords and tenants is repairs. Make sure you go over how the tenant is to communicate with you repairs. Let me back that up a little bit. Communicate what repairs you expect the tenant to take care of. I would keep that at a minimum, changing light bulbs, maybe changing the air filter on your HVAC, doing like smaller things. And then anything that you don't expect them to do that they expect you to do, you want to tell them how are they going to communicate those repairs to you. And then also set the expectation of what constitutes an emergency repair, what's the timing within which they can expect an emergency repair to be completed, and then what the timing is for non-emergency repairs. It's so valuable to be on the same page about repairs before you move somebody in, because again, it leads to a lot of friction with tenants. So the last thing is just something that's easy to forget, and that is schedule your utility turn-off. So make sure that you know which utilities you have in your name. Power, typically it's going to be power, water, if you have gas at the house, anything like that. You want to make sure you schedule the utility turn-off. Your tenant should know when you give them the lease that they are expected to, within 24 hours, take the lease to the utility company and get their utility set up on their behalf. And that, will normally get yours turned off, but you want to make sure that you don't go 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months forgetting to turn off your utilities, and all of a sudden you realize, oh man, I've paid hundreds of dollars in utilities that I didn't have to. So again, this is a part of our ongoing series of videos directly intended for our do-it-yourself landlords out there. We want to provide you with the tools that you need to do a great job of managing your property. If you enjoyed this, which I hope you have, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Facebook. We intend to put out more and more of these videos. If there's something you'd like to see that we haven't covered, please let us know in the comments below. Again, my name is Clay Lehman. I'm with Resolute Property Management. Thank you so much.